Hi, and welcome to the Flute Show here at virtualsheetmusic.com with Florence Estrin. I'm Robert Estrin, and today's subject is, what is French tonguing? I guess this might just be on the flute, because I know there's no analogy on the French horn, ironically enough. Maybe you could tell us about this, Florence?
Well, I don't know. Have you had a French horn teacher?
That's a very good question. You know, I have had a German French horn teacher, but I've never had a French horn teacher. So maybe there is something in that.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
I was just so lucky that when I was in junior high, I had the honor of studying with Ransom Wilson, who was a student of Jean-Pierre Rampal. And at one point, he told me what he described as French tonguing. And it's a very tongue-forward kind of thing. You actually put the tongue outside of your mouth to tongue. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because, you know, I did that for a while, and before that I had teachers who taught me to place the tongue just behind my teeth, mm-hmm. and do it some right at the roof of the mouth behind the teeth.
On French horn, it's usually a tu, or in the low register, maybe a da. But the idea of even putting the tongue in contact with the teeth, between the teeth, is never done because it would be too harsh of a sound.
Well, interestingly, you know, then I ended up with other teachers who, again, it was either ti or tu, and I guess the French tongue is more like poo, a slightly different version of tu. Mm-hmm. And what I found was that I liked using it for certain applications, but not all applications necessarily. But, you know, there's a lot of times where I revert to using French tonguing. And what I discovered, for me personally, the most powerful use of the French tonguing, I was in a music festival many years ago in my youth, and one of the things I hated about playing first in orchestra was, especially in rehearsals, you might be sitting there for an eternity while the conductor's working with the strings, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we start at letter B and maybe I have to come in pianissimo on a high A. And the fear of, is this note going to crack? You know? Okay,
well, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. I want you to do that right now and use the French tongue and see if it helps you. Not too bad. What if you used your traditional, regular tonguing on that note? Of course, now you have the benefit of playing it once. So at this point, do you still use that technique at all?
Yes, mm-hmm. I definitely do. I tend to use it just for, well, you know, sometimes you don't realize you're using a lot of different, you know, until you start analyzing what you're doing. But for certain soft entrances, it can be very, very useful, even in any register sometimes. Right. Although in the low register, a lot of times the da is a very effective thing, as we've talked about on earlier shows. But mm-hmm.
Now, were those da, or was that French tonguing?
That was all French tonguing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
it's a very clean, clear attack, isn't it? A little more definite than you get with a tu or a da, or not?
I just feel it's more secure. Mm-hmm. You know, well, with a do or a da, yeah.
So why wouldn't
it would be more?
So here's a question: why wouldn't you just use French tonguing all the time? And do some players do that?
I couldn't speak for other players, but I imagine from some of the things I've read on the internet that there's like two schools of thought, mm-hmm. and generally the Europeans tend to use the French mm-hmm. tonguing, and then the Americans do not.
So what is the downside to why would you want to avoid French tonguing if it's more secure? What's the downside of it?
Well, you know, I think it's a little bit of personal taste too, mm-hmm. and I also think it perhaps could have something to do with how you are built. Mm-hmm. I felt for many years, because of an overbite, that the French tonguing was very natural feeling to me, because my tongue could slip out very mm-hmm. easily.
And why don't you use it all the time?
Because I just find that application to be the best. When I'm playing loud in the third octave, I don't tend to use that tonguing. I go further back in my mouth. And that's just what works for me. And I think it's a very personal thing, because I think all these kind of applications can work with the tonguing. It's what you've practiced doing. Well, what I did this particular summer that I was in this music camp that was an orchestra instructional camp, there were a few practice rooms that actually had mirrors in them. And what was great about that is that I spent this inordinate amount of time just studying my mouth and what seemed to work for the soft entrances. And that's when I discovered, oh, it's when I'm sticking my tongue out the way I was taught to do French tonguing. That seems to work better for me. And so that's what I did. Now, I do want to point out that it's not just a matter of how you use your tongue. Before you do a high note attack, whether you're playing soft or loud, whether it's an eighth note or a long note, you need to take a really good breath. You need to use your diaphragm. And then the other thing is, don't just think of the attack. Think of the note following the attack. Because if you just think of the attack, then you might actually be paralyzed with your tongue there and you don't even know when to start it. You know, you're just scared to even do anything because you're just so focused on that. Think the phrase, think what you're going to play, think musically, and it actually makes it a lot easier so that, but you know, when you're practicing how to do it in the first place, you have to know what you're doing. So that's what I did at that point. But now, many times I'm not thinking about it one way or the other, and I'm sure I'm using a combination.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Love to hear from viewers, anybody who uses French tonguing exclusively. That would be really interesting, and the pros and cons other people have found with it. Really fascinating subject. I want to thank you, Florence Estrin, once again, flute expert here at virtualsheetmusic.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Robert Estrin. See you next one.